Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Cycle, the Fantasy Pros Fantasy Baseball podcast. I am your host, Mike Maher. I am not Ryan Wormley. He is not here with us today. He just absolutely refuses to host the show with me. I just recently saw him in Vegas, and he said, I'm having shoulder surgery next week. Do the show without me. And I will just say, I had the same surgery as Worm did, and I'm here, and he is not. So you can say maybe the fact that my surgery was 7 weeks ago and his was on Monday as to why I'm here and he's not, but I feel like that's irrelevant. I would still be here regardless. But he's not here, and I'm going to talk about the 2025 Fantasy Baseball draft strategies and targets that you need to know. And I'm joined today by Kelly Kirby, an upgrade over Worm. Fun fact, Kelly's nickname in high school was actually the upgrade, so we can talk about that as well. Kelly, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. I think some players rehab a little bit faster than other players, but I do think we should cut them a little slack for it being 4 days ago, for the most part. But yeah, no, I am doing pretty great. I am looking at all the players, looking at all the strategies, trying to figure out what I want to do for some of the bigger drafts. And for the most part, it just makes my brain spin. So it'll be great.
Well, I don't know how much slack we can actually cut him for having surgery on Monday, because he had surgery on Monday. He's not here. Mm-hmm. You, by the looks of your backdrop, actually passed away recently and are doing the show from heaven.
Yes.
Because that is a blindingly white backdrop. We desperately have to send you a backdrop. But it is fun for this show, and it's especially fun because you're doing it from, the other side. And more committed than Worm, for sure.
More committed. I died and came back to talk about pocket aces. So let's do this.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive right in. As I mentioned, we're going to talk about fantasy baseball draft strategies and targets. I'm going to hit on some strategies right here at the top. And then what we're going to do is kind of go through some of our favorite early, middle, and late round targets, kind of intertwined with those strategies. So not going to spend the whole time on the strategies, but as we talk about our topics or our favorite targets, we will hit on, kind of when you can draft these guys based on the different strategies that you're using. So a quick intro. We're not going to do all the strategies because there are a ton of them, but some of the most popular ones. One of the more popular ones in recent years is pocket aces, which is drafting 2 elite starting pitchers early, whether it's in the first 2 rounds or definitely within the first 3 rounds to kind of set up your build. I have some thoughts on that strategy for this year because I think there might be a little bit of a way to cheat it this year as opposed to having to really double dip at the top. There's best player available, which is a very common strategy, especially for new players or especially for people who want to build those balanced rosters. Just drafting the highest ranked player, regardless of position, let the draft come to you. I feel like a lot of people play that way. I play that way a lot, just depending on how drafts are going. I don't know about you, Kelly. Do you ever go into a draft with a hard, like, I'm going to go into this draft with this strategy? Or do you just kind of let the draft come to you and kind of see what happens? Because I feel like I tend to just, even if I do like something like pocket aces, I don't always necessarily dive in expecting that unless it's like, I kind of know who I'm in the league with. I'm picking at a certain point and I think I can exploit the ADP a little bit. Mm-hmm. But how do you typically approach it?
I would say that I have a strategy usually, but my strategy is like for the first 7 or 8 rounds, and then from there I kind of let the draft come to me. It gets so tossed out the window if some player falls way too far. Then it's like you kind of shift into this best player available situation. But no, like 2 years ago, I think I did not take a pitcher until round 8 because I thought pitching was so deep, and I just stacked on hitting. Which is also another approach that I think you're going to talk about. Yeah,
I am. And it's also worth noting that we can talk a little bit about how some of these strategies went last year. We won't spend too much time on last year because last year was last year. We don't care anymore. We're worried about this year. But, if you went pocket aces with Spencer Strider, didn't go that well. But also, if you went hitter heavy early and took Ronald Acuna at the 101, also not a great year for you. Mm-hmm. So there is risk with all the different strategies, and, there's just bad luck throughout. So you can't always worry about that. So we talked about the first 2. The next one that Kelly just mentioned was the hitter heavy approach, which is prioritizing bats early and going really heavy with bats early and kind of waiting on pitching. You can also call it like 0 SP if you want to compare it to like 0 RB in football or like late round SP. I've definitely done that a bunch in recent years just based on how kind of pitching looked heading into the year. And sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. But I always feel like there is like that blob in the middle that I think the CBS guys call it the blob, where you can get like decent value where guys are all like there's a pocket of like 40 pitchers who are all separated by several rounds of ADP, but they're kind of like the same guy. Another strategy that's more for like salary cap auction leagues and stars and scrubs, paying high up for your Otanis and in previous years the Acuñas, and then just trying to piece together the last handful of spots on your roster with just like $1 players, which is a pretty popular strategy. Drafting for floor / ceiling, prioritizing either like consistent or reliable performers or risky high upside options. I feel like I kind of double dip on that strategy in like the middle and late rounds because I feel like I try to pair like the boring veteran that has fallen too far with like the exciting dart throw where, if you can hit on both of those, you're going to win your league. But, it's probably safer to kind of like prioritize the boring veterans because there just seems to be so much value there. But I usually can't resist, and we'll talk about one of them later, just, the sexy dart throw. And then some other ones, positional scarcity and versatility, kind of focusing on, and this is something that a lot of fantasy managers worry about during their drafts. You always go into a year, if you do your research, you'll see like this position is shallow. Like there are 6 starting third basemen in X year. And if you don't get one of them, you're going to have to stream that position or just see if you can find something throughout the year. So paying attention to that stuff. And then also, people or players that have the versatility to kind of, if you can get a really, I try not to like chase it too much, but if you can get some really reliable players that have versatility, it opens up what you can do in the middle and later rounds because you don't have to worry about those positions. Right. The balanced roster construction strategy, which is pretty similar to best player available, but having to pay attention to, where you're spending your resources. And then the Marmol strategy, which is one that I definitely do not have the stones to pull off, which is basically going really header heavy, punting like all pitching, and then just loading up on like no starters and relievers to essentially try to game the system in roto leagues where you're punting essentially like wins and strikeouts, but you're trying to win like pretty much all the hitting categories because you're just going like 15 rounds in a row of hitters or 12 or whatever it is. And then loading up on relievers that maybe not the top end relievers, but like just like, a whole string of, middle tier relievers to try and, win ERA and saves and all the hitting categories and see if you can win your league that way. I don't know that I could ever necessarily pull that one off I hate the general strategy of punting categories. How about you? Could you ever do the Marmol strategy or in more general, like, do you ever maybe intentionally or just do you ever punt categories? Are you ever comfortable punting categories? Because it terrifies me to do it.
In a head-to-head, I will do it. Like in a roto, I've never really tried it. And as a Cubs fan, anything that's named after Carlos Marmol, I don't really know if I could. I don't know if I could do that. Like it was that was a roller coaster. But I like the idea, and I think that occasionally late in the draft, I'll kind of start to do that where I'm like I'm fine with the guys who are going to protect the whip, protect my ratios, or try to offset something I did earlier. And I kind of do it, and I do the same thing with hitters where I've paired Schwarber and Luis Ariz multiple times. I'm like, well, he'll kind of at least help, kind of fix that average. But it's interesting, and the strategies that are that extreme, like once you decide you're doing it, that is it. Like you have to do it for the whole season. Like it cannot be, I'm gonna do this during the draft and then give up on it right away. Like you kind of have to commit to it because otherwise you've really screwed yourself over the second you start not doing that anymore. So.
Yeah, and that is a pretty important distinction between head-and-head and roto because head-and-head, you still have to buy in, but you're just trying to win one week at a time, and there's a lot of fluctuations in those kind of like smaller sample sizes. In roto, it can kind of be a cheat code, but it can also just go south immediately, and then in April you are not winning that league, which is just the worst feeling. Yeah, that is a good distinction. We can kind of we'll talk about throughout kind of like head-to-head versus roto because I'm in a bunch of both leagues, and the strategies do vary. I I feel like I kind of lean head to head. I know like the traditional like baseball fan of me should like really be into roto, but maybe it's just because I've had more success with head to head, and I almost feel like I can exploit it a little bit more. Maybe that's why I just kind of like lean towards it. Whereas like roto is like very hard, and you need to be good like all year.
Yep.
As opposed to previous years where I'm heading into June feeling good in roto, and then I come in like 6th place.
Yep.
But before we get started, I did want to mention we are now on YouTube. The cycle was audio only for most of last season. So please join us here on YouTube. And also jump in the YouTube comments and let us know your favorite strategies for this year. Ask questions about our favorite strategies. What strategies are you guys using? Have you used in the past? What worked for you last year? So let's chat about it in the comments. And if there's any good questions, we'll bring them up and we'll talk about them next week too. Before we go any further, I do have to mention Draft Wizard because we're talking about fantasy draft strategies, and the Draft Wizard is one of the best tools that we have here at Fantasy Pros. And you can use the Draft Wizard to get expert rankings, perform quick mock drafts, and receive real-time advice during your draft to build a winning team. We're also going to be doing a ton of mock drafts in Discord coming up in the next several weeks. That's always a really exciting time during fantasy football and fantasy football draft season. We have a really active Discord community, and we really hop in there. And the experts mock draft with everyone, and it's really cool because you can either mock draft against our kind of like AI generated experts on the platform, but we also fill in Discord our live mock drafts with live people, so you can actually mock draft with your league settings with 12 real people, which is really cool, and it's a really great community in there. So definitely check out Draft Wizard and the Discord. And more about Draft Wizard, you can practice your draft strategy in minutes at any time with fast, realistic mock drafts powered by expert insights and also powered by your league settings, because you can sync your leagues and actually draft based on your league settings, as I just said. And if you want to check it out, head over to fantasypros.com/MLB Draft Wizard or download the MLB Draft Wizard app wherever you get your apps today. And that link again is fantasypros.com/MLB Draft Wizard, all one word. Now, we got the business out of the way. Let's talk early round targets.
Perfect.
And Kelly, let's talk about your. So when we do this, we each for early round, middle round, late round. I kind of teased you a little bit there. You thought I was going to toss it to you, but now I'm pulling it right back. I'm going to keep talking. We're going to talk a little bit about like pitchers and hitters in early, middle, and late rounds. So for each of these, we're each going to go over like a pitcher, a hitter, or a few of them each time. So for this, let's talk about your favorite or your preferred early round pitcher that you want to talk about. And it's an interesting one because I have some questions.
You have some questions. Okay. So you always have questions for me. So my kind of early round pitcher, assuming I'm not going in pocket aces at all, is Logan Gilbert. I kind of want the entire Seattle staff, as long is that considered punting the wins category if you go with the Seattle staff, because they have no offense, but Gilbert last year, he led the MLB in innings pitched. He struck out 220 batters. He had microscopic 0.89 whip, and he just never walks anyone. And I think that there's something really intriguing, or it just attracts me to him for that, because I feel like those ratios are going to be protected with, like, if I serve him or if I have him as my SP1, it's a viable idea to keep the ERA and whip down without having to go with the Skenes and Scoobles as early. So I think I'm more like kind of where he currently is being drafted. You can kind of like an ADP of 26 get you to at least the third round or somewhere in the third round. So I like that because I can take two hitters ahead of him.
Yeah, so that's interesting for a few reasons. The one is you kind of touched on, like, even if you are kind of doing pocket aces, I feel like he is one of those kind of cheat codes that I was mentioning before, because a lot of times when you talk about pocket aces, it's, and we'll talk about when I talk about my guys too, it's like you're basically drafting aces right at the top of the draft, first, second round, especially if you get like a middle to late round, first round pick, and you can just kind of like double tap right away. But he's someone you can get in, like you said, like potentially in the third round. And so you could, if you consider him part of that tier of pocket aces, which he's right there, you can kind of go pocket aces, but also go like ace first round, hitter second round, and I'm going to talk about some of my targets there too. And then this next tier of pitchers like Logan Gilbert right there in that round. Logan Gilbert's a really interesting one for the reasons you mentioned. He also kind of had like a mini, maybe not even mini, maybe just a flat out breakout last year, because he was a guy that I, in like remember like last year coming into the year, I was like, he's really good, but he's not just a guy. He's like better than a guy, but he's like kind of a guy. He doesn't strike out more than a batter per inning, which I know is not like, the best like characteristic, but it is something we look at. And he had in his career, like when he first came up, he did, but in a smaller sample. But then like 2022, he had a really strong year, 185 innings, 174 strikeouts, 22.7% K rate, and ERA low threes. Expected numbers were all like mid to high threes. Last year, ERA went up a little bit. We had more innings and just under a strikeout per inning, so like still a really solid year. Or 2023, I should say. I didn't mean to say last year. And his ERA was 3.73. Expected stuff was all exactly there, so you're getting exactly what you expected. K rate jumped a little bit from 22.7 to 24.5, and then last year went over 200 innings, 220 strikeouts. Lowered the ERA back to the low threes. Expected numbers are all right there or better. And the K rate jumped to 27.4%. And like you said, that despite the increase in Ks, his whip actually went down to that really small. You don't see a lot of whips below 1 for a starting pitcher.
Right.
And so
yeah,
it's like, is this going to continue? Is he elite now? It's hard to say. I mean, like.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he qualifies as necessarily elite, but those numbers are great. And so... And, you and I have talked about West Coast players a lot where sometimes they get overlooked no matter what happens. And he's sitting out there in a team that not a lot of people pay attention to. But I was thinking, instead of pocket aces, you could go pocket workhorses and go Wheeler, Gilbert. And then you could pretty much ignore starting pitching for a really long time because they're your 200 inning guys. So he's just intriguing in that way. And I feel like he'll just always take the ball and I'm not going to have to worry about him, save for injury. But
yeah, that's a good point. And in that strategy, depending on your ADP, you could potentially go hitter first round, Wheeler second round, and then Gilbert third round. It's not a guarantee you're going to get all three of those two pitchers, right. But also if you like right now, Ohtani is the top ranked pitcher. That's really he's not the top pitcher. He's just the top overall player because of the pitching. But if you don't include Ohtani, it's Paul Skenes, who I'm going to talk about, Tariq Skubal, Zach Wheeler, and then Logan Gilbert's SB4. And so the one thing I don't like is that the price is kind of baked in already. Like you're kind of paying for that 2024 breakout. I really wish it was like a little bit lower, but also you can't deny, like you said, the reliability, the innings. He's gone over 185 innings, 3 straight years with more innings each year. And just kind of, even if you get something between 2023 and 2024, it's still really good. Like for 200 innings, 200 strikeouts. Yep. We'll see how many wins he gets in Seattle. That ballpark is really hard to hit in for opposing hitters and also their own hitters. So that helps his numbers too. So you have that built-in home field advantage there. So the other guy I got to tease that I was going to mention is Paul Skenes. And he's someone who just like one of the more incredible rookie seasons we've ever seen. If I'm going to go pocket aces or pitcher early, he's definitely someone I want to get. And I like that his ADP right now is between like 10 and 14. So you can get him at the end of the first round, which is what I kind of mentioned before. And if I want to do something like pocket aces and see if I can do like Skenes and Skubal, because I really feel like they're the top two. Like if we're talking tiers, I feel like it's Skenes and Skubal, or their own tier. And then that next tier begins with Wheeler and Logan Gilbert. And then I almost feel like you can kind of cut that off as a tier because they're kind of like the workhorse tier. And then you get into like really good pitchers, but with question marks. Corbin Burns, Chris Sale, Garrett Crochet, who's someone I'm going to talk about too, but also like is kind of scary with, and then Dylan Cease, Cole Ragans. There's some question marks there. So like if you can double dip with any of these top 4 pitchers, I think you should. I think it's an interesting strategy for this year, just because while I think pitching can be deep, it's not that deep at the top of the list here. What do you think about like Skenes, Skubal trying to like double dip that if you're picking in that 10 to 12 window in your league?
I mean, I feel like if you're going to do pocket aces, you really kind of need that late round. Like you need that late round pick because otherwise you're not going to get both of them. I can see it as a thing to try. But my concern is when you are on that 10-12, if you use the two of them, by the time it gets back to you, like how many players are going to be gone. And so now you're basically halfway through tier 2 of hitters. But man, if those two guys stay healthy and get their full workload in, like no one's going to touch you on pitching for the most part. So yeah, I mean, I find them exciting players. And so I feel like it would be fun to have them on your team in addition to being statistically like beneficial. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'll probably do it in one league because I like pitching way too much. So that's my problem.
I think what I might try in a couple leagues is what we just talked about, where if I have a late first, I might try to double tap Skenes and Skubal and see if I can get them both. If I have a mid round first, and I still might go Skenes, knowing I'm not going to get Skubal, but then I can get a hitter in that early window, and then I can still, depending on where my pick comes, I can still get a Wheeler, or a Logan Gilbert, or potentially a Garrett Crochet, who I am willing to take in the third round. I would prefer a safer pick. But I do think Garrett Crochet has an interesting ceiling. What about your hitter? What about your early round hitter that is intriguing that you would like to discuss here on the cycle?
I feel like I may end up overdrafting this guy because I never draft this guy, and every time I write his player note,
I always draft this guy. So.
Every time I write his player note, I'm always just like, why do I not draft this guy? So Francisco Lindor is just like a walking 30-30 season. He only stole 29 games last year, or 29 bases last year, but that's close enough in my world. And now he gets to bat in front of Juan Soto. I don't care if you put him in front or behind, it doesn't matter, like that. And then you get Alonso in there, like he's gonna score you a ton of runs. And he's just got that floor that, I mean, you can't, I feel like he's just got the highest floor of anyone in the first like 3 rounds that you can just count on, no questions asked, this is what you're going to get. So yeah, he's easily my favorite. And like, he would probably be the player that would stop me from doing pocket aces just because his ADP is 12, 16. So you got to get him in that second round. So it's hard to do the pitching.
Yeah, and he's a guy that kind of, I don't want to say he's been underappreciated because he's been an all-star. He's been like a really good player, but like even in fantasy, he's been like so reliable. And even last year, he got off to that slow start and everyone was kind of worried about him. And then by the end of the year, he was an MVP candidate and everyone was talking about how underappreciated he is and how awesome he is. And I was like, I know, he's always been awesome. I always draft him in fantasy because he's always great. And he's always just like producing across the board. And it's again, you know, you can get him at the end of the first round, early second round, depending on your league, probably late first round. But, you know, depending on where the ADP falls, but his ADP right now, just looking at the different leagues, it's right at the turn. You know, it's 11 on Yahoo. It's 15 on ESPN. NFBC is 15. You can get him in the second round in some really good leagues. So yeah, I completely agree. We don't spend a ton of time on Francisco Lindor and our early round love for him, but I completely agree. Mine is Mookie Betts for kind of similar reasons. He had a bit of a down year, if you want to call it that, but also still really good despite missing some time. He's someone you can get in like the middle to late of the first round still. His ADP is around like 7, 9, 10, depending on the format. And the only players going ahead of him are Ohtani, Bobby Witt, Aaron Judge, Jose Ramirez, Juan Soto, Gunnar Henderson, Kyle Tucker. And maybe not ahead of that top 5, but ahead of the next few. I think I would still prefer Mookie Betts, especially when we talked about before, is that positional versatility, because he's going to have outfield, second base, and shortstop versatility. So if you take an early Mookie Betts, your roster construction is just wide open. You can do whatever you want. And so that's someone that I've kind of, you know, he's someone who has my, you know, we don't have to spend a ton of time with early round talents. Like, hey, Mookie Betts is really good. Francisco Lindor is really good. Like, of course. But it is interesting to kind of talk about like why we're targeting them. And so if we have an early first round pick, like if I was 101, I'm taking Ohtani. So it is what it is. And if not, probably Bobby Witt. And then you can talk about some of the other ones. And then before we jump to middle round, the one thing I wanted to mention a little bit about like kind of that second round, like the pocket ace tweeners, if you're going like early pitcher, hitter second round, and then third round. I didn't preface this for you at all, so you have no preparation for what I'm about to talk about, except for the fact that I teased it a little bit in the sheet. But I do players I like targeting in that second round. If you're kind of going to try and split the difference, that I call like tweeners. Lindor, who we already talked about, Jarren Duran, who just had a fantastic season, and then Jasson Chourio. All three, you're getting kind of across the board production, like power, speed, combo, average. So those are players, if you're going to try and double dip, that I like to kind of like build my roster around, because then you're getting 2 pocket aces and still a really good foundation of contributors. So is there anyone putting you on the spot kind of in that second round tweener category that you would try to like sandwich around pocket aces other than the guys I mentioned? Or maybe you disagree with the guys I mentioned. We'll see.
No, I like the guys you mentioned. I think I feel like that would be your best, like what there should be a name for it, like your third pocket ace. But like just something along the lines of, those are such solid contributors. And again, they give you across the board. And if you're going to do this, like that's what you need is in that second round, whoever's going to give you the most of the 5 hitting categories is the one to go after. I think Chourio scares me just a smidge, not a ton, just a little bit. But Lindor and Duran, I'm okay. I would be fine with either one of them if that was your strategy that you were using.
Yeah, and the difference there, we're talking about the 5 category contributor, is that the other players kind of in that tier are Vlad, not not getting a speed. Jordan Alvarez, whichever name he's going by this year. Bryce Harper, Freddie Freeman. So still really, really good players. But if you're going pocket aces and pitching early, I'd prefer to like have more across the board contributor. Okay.
Yep.
Anything else before I jump to the next tier?
I would only say that for sure when you mentioned that, I'm like, the one position I would absolutely not draft in the second round is first base. So like,
why not?
If you're going to do that for that exact reason that like, yeah, you've got power there, but I feel like there's options later. So
for sure.
That's my plan.
Yeah. That's good advice. That's why you're on the show.
For sure.
Now let's talk middle round targets.
Okay.
And let's start with your first pitcher. Another intriguing one, I would say.
So my pick here is Sandy Alcantara, and I don't know if I would have picked this prior to watching yesterday's live stream with Welsh and Joe, but they kind of gave monologues about how much we should be kind of focusing on Alcantara coming back. And that's he's a very interesting case when you talk about coming back from Tommy John surgery, because a lot of times their velocity goes up and it takes them a while to find their control. But he's such a control pitcher. So it's like, I am curious to see if he will be able to recover that maybe a little bit faster, because that was a specialty beforehand, and get the increased velocity. It could just make him a steal in where he's currently going, which is an ADP of 159. So I feel like he's worth the risk in the 14th round or in that vicinity, because if he hits and comes back fully, like, I mean, he could be an easy SP2. So
yeah, and that's the key there. I was kind of doing the math while you were talking. I was like, his ADP is outside the top 150, which is pretty interesting for a pitcher of his caliber, but still terrifying that he's coming off of an injury like that. But yeah, I don't really like to let Joe talk me into too many things, so you didn't really sell me there. But if you and Welsh are also interested, then maybe that balances out Joe's opinion. No offense, Joe. I know you're not going to watch, so it's okay. Just kidding, everybody. Don't fire me. But yeah, I mean, it's scary because of the injury, but it's also, like you said, the price is kind of accounting for that. So he's outside the top 150. He's like between like the 13th, 14th round. That's a really good time to take a gamble on a pitcher like that. I wonder how many innings we're going to get from him, but he's projected to like do over 150 innings, throw over 150 innings, maybe even touching like 180, which might be aggressive, but he did throw, other than the COVID kind of mini season, 2019, 197 innings, 2021, 205, 2022, 228, 2023, 184. So he, granted he just missed over a year, but he has had that workhorse ability in the past. So getting up to 170 innings, which I think is probably what you would need in order to recoup this value, especially because he's not a high volume strikeout guy. Although maybe he is. Maybe he comes back with that rookie of the year arm, and he he is a strikeout guy now.
For sure.
Yeah, really intriguing name for those reasons. My pitcher also a little scary, but also very exciting. Jared Jones. And there's no Tommy John this year to talk about with Jared Jones. But I don't know. I just feel like his ADP is way too low, and he's a pitcher that if things go, he's going right around the same area as Alcantara, maybe around before him, around like that 140, 150 range. But I really think he has ace upside, and his main thing is he needs to develop a third pitch. Right. But it's like even if his curveball or changeup are just not terrible, just a little bit better than last year, he could be an ace. And like he's already like even without them, he's already still really good. So if he can just he's kind of overshadowed by Paul Skenes. And I didn't realize until right now I picked 2 Pirates pitchers, which like what a way to start off the advice with 2 Pirates pitchers. But I am really, really intrigued by Jared Jones because even last year, only throwing 121 and 2/3 innings, ERA right around 4. Expected numbers were a little bit better, and there were some kind of like hot and cold streaks there where I think if he can put it together, you could get a really good return on investment around the 140, 150 range. So what is your take on Jared Jones this year?
Pretty much exactly what your take is, where when we were talking about adding another pitch, and we were both just like, I mean, it doesn't have to be great. The hitters just have to know you have it, and you can locate it. I feel like if he gets that, he would jump a tier pretty quickly. And again, depending on what strategy you're using, like if you do the hitter heavy strategy and wait 6-7 rounds before you take a pitcher, like these are the guys that you're going to want to get, and they're not necessarily safe floor, but they have that ability and that potential to do what you skipped out on in the first 6 rounds. So from a strategy perspective, if you're going to go hitter heavy, like Jared Jones and Alcantara and other pitchers in that range are the ones you're going to kind of want to go on a run with, I think, to kind of shore up your rotation with just more risk than what some people can tolerate. So no, I'm a fan of Jones too.
Yeah, I think they're both high upside picks, and it's a good point you make that if you're going hitter early, this is where you're going to be taking pitchers, and it's do you want to take Jared Jones? Do you want to take Alcantara? Other names, like I'd rather have them than like Reynaldo Lopez or not to be a hater like I ended last year, but I'm not a big Luis Heel guy, and he's going in the same range. Kodai Senga, a lot of question marks there. Very intriguing, but also like terrifying injury stuff there. Jack Flaherty, probably rather have Jared Jones and Alcantara than those guys. Spencer Strider is a name in that area I'd be very interested in, assuming he starts the year relatively soon, but also we'll see how it goes there. But yeah, like you said, if you go hitting early, this is where you're going to be taking pitchers. But what about a hitter that you're trying to target in the middle rounds? And you have another interesting one.
I have another interesting one. So my hitter in the middle rounds is Vinnie Pasquantino, and mostly just because what he did last year prior to the thumb injury, and they said that the thumb should be fully healed. So I can ride this out with the Italian breakfast. I think he drove in 97, because he bats behind Bobby Witt and Sal Perez, and as long as you're going to do that, like he's going to have people to bat in all day long. The reason he's going so much later than the other guys, I think, is the power is just not expected to be there as much. So you're kind of sacrificing home runs from what should normally be a power position.
Right.
But otherwise, his average is in the 260s. Is he the one that doesn't strike out at all? His strikeout rate is 12.8% and his whiff rate is 14.5%, and both of them are in the 96th percentile in the league. So he's gonna make contact, and if his BABIP stays if he's not snake bit by BABIP, he's gonna give you a lot of power. He's gonna give you a lot of doubles power, and in the 10th or 11th round, I'm fine with that. So he's going to rack up the RBIs this year.
Yeah, and what you said was exactly what I was going to push back on a little bit, is that, the power. We're still kind of projecting the power for him. He's still a pretty young hitter, but it's we're still kind of waiting for the power to continue to develop. And we saw it last year a little bit. He still hit 19 home runs in 131 games, but he had only hit 19 home runs in his previous 2 seasons, but still right around the same amount of games across those 2 seasons. Right. So like they're projecting him to like top 20 home runs, which would be nice. 25 would be incredible with all the other counting stats that you mentioned. He's going outside the top 100, right around like 110, 112. You know who else is going in that range? Very intriguing player.
Who?
Christian Yelich. Christian Yelich is going in that range.
Every podcast do we have to do this? Okay.
But Christian Yelich is not the player I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a player very different from Christian Yelich, but this is very much I don't want to like abuse the term like league winner, but this player has the potential where he's being drafted to be a league winner.
Yep.
And it's Jasson Dominguez, Jasson. Dominguez of the Yankees, who's projected to start for the Yankees in their outfield. He's got that very intriguing short porch in right field. He's being drafted outside the top 150, and I don't know. I just feel like again, we're projecting a lot here. It's a young hitter. You know, we're hoping he's going to stay up the whole year. So there is. I'm not saying this is not without risk,
Right.
but outside the top 150 is a great time to roll the dice on a player like this, because you know there's 25-25 potential here in that ballpark, and you know he can run a little bit, and you know if you can get him, like, I mean, like there's a world where you're getting Jackson Chourio production from Jasson Dominguez 12 rounds later, you know, like crazy. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I feel like that's my hesitation with Chourio is literally it's Dominguez. It's the idea of they remind me of each other in a lot of ways, and everyone's been talking about Jasson or Jasson since he was like 12. And so it's really exciting to like have him finally be up and have a position and you know, to get some playing time every day, because I think he could light the world on fire. So I'm with you entirely on the intrigue of getting him as late as it's going.
Perfect. You agree with me, so you're correct.
Great.
Let's jump over to late round targets, where it gets really fun, and we can talk a little bit about like sleepers, or if you went really zero SP, you're going to need to probably grab some of these pitchers. Or if you went like stars and scrubs in like a salary cap league, you know, we're in the scrub territory. We're in scrub areas. So your pitcher is a favorite of mine, as many know who listen to the show. So why don't you talk about the pitcher that I almost said by accident right now? I almost said his name for you.
So I picked Jeffrey Springs, and to be perfectly honest, I feel like there's a small part of me that I felt like we missed out on so much in 2023, like that he was going to be so good, and then just it was over after 3 games, and it's like I feel like I want a second chance with that. He's 2 years out from the Tommy John. He's 32, which is always surprising to me because I feel like he should be way younger than that. But he also has he has a fastball changeup like combo that I think is really really effective. And he threw in a slider as well last year. So it's kind of like around that 22nd, 23rd round, you know, I feel like he's, again, I'm usually very injury risk averse, but like he's 2 years out. I think it'll be worth seeing what he comes back with. The scary part, of course, is that he's not in Tampa anymore. He's going to be in Sacramento. But we don't know for sure how that ballpark's going to play. So to say that, you know, one way or the other, but I just think he's got stuff that would be worth having that late to take a chance on.
Yeah, that's the one thing I was going to ask about is the ballpark. We know they're playing the interesting thing is that, you know, you hear like we're going to like a minor league kind of ballpark, and everyone thinks of like Dunedin with the Blue Jays, where they were just like home run city all the time. But it's not. It's kind of the same dimensions as, you know, where they were playing in Oakland. Not as much foul territory, but we also don't know, like that's not like a 1-to-1 comparison. We don't, like, the ball might just travel, you know, really well there, which is a thing that can happen in smaller ballparks where you don't have the huge kind of like stadium built around it. The ball might jump out of there. So we don't really know, like you said, kind of how that's going to play. But also, like, Tampa is not like the best, most pitcher friendly ballpark anyway, but they just have such great pitching development that you kind of overlook some of that stuff. But yeah, I like the Jeffrey Springs take. My I was gonna say the innings thing is he's probably gonna get like 130 innings out of him, which is kind of the same thing that I have a much different pick. I'm gonna go with Kumar Rocker. Just like the opposite of a safe pick. Like this is like another one of those sexy dart throws. Like he came up and he just like he looked really good last year and really exciting. And he's supposed to start for the Rangers this year. This is a late round dart throw. Like see if you can catch lightning in a bottle. Especially if it's like a keeper league or something like that. Like, like we are in an auction salary cap keeper league where you could probably get someone like Kumar Rocker pretty cheap and like hold on to him for a few seasons. That could be really exciting. But again, for him, like our max, you're probably getting 120 innings out of him.
Right.
So that kind of caps some of the excitement. Like 130 is probably like the absolute max, but we're probably talking like 110, 120. But any interest in Kumar Rocker?
Yes. Yeah. He's also on my list without any question. So, for like kind of the same reasons that when he came up, I just loved, so I streamed him kind of, toward the end of the season, I think. And he got me what I wanted, at a very important time. So yeah, how much are they going to let him throw is a problem. But again, this is a late pick. Like it's okay to grab somebody who's only going to land in that area of the 120, 130, because what are you asking for at that point? Like if he gives you SP 3-4 numbers in 130 innings, like congratulations, you won the 23rd round or wherever he is. So yeah, so no, I'm a big fan.
I didn't even notice until right now that the consensus ADP for Jeffrey Springs 296, Kumar Rocker 297. So we picked two players right next. I keep saying people instead of players. Two players right next to each other. I mean, they are people.
I was going to say they are people, but that's okay.
But
yeah,
for our purposes, they are players.
Right.
So now, a very deep pull. Why don't you talk about a potential homer pick for you, but an intriguing one nonetheless. So why don't we talk about your hitter, your late round hitter?
A 100% homer pick minus a couple of things. My late round pick is Matt Shaw. The Cubs haven't had a third baseman since Chris Bryant, and they brought in 40-year-old Justin Turner, and there's no way he's going to play every day, and there's no way that he's going to play every day, and there's no way he's going to play well every day. And so I feel like he's just kind of either keeping the spot warm or he's there to sort of like mentor him, because I just feel like I personally believe he should be the opening day third baseman for Chicago if he's healthy and good to go. But I mean, last year he hit 21 home runs, stole 31 bases, and everything that I've read about him is kind of that he has a strong hard hit percentage. He maintained a high on base percentage. Like he just kind of, I feel like his floor for a rookie would be higher than most other players. And again, that's if he has second base, third base eligibility, because he's played second base for the most part. Like why not that late in the game? So again, he's a 100% flyer and 99% homer pick.
Yeah, I saw his name in the sheet and I was a little stunned, but then I kind of, I was like, all right, let me research this a little bit. And I was like, all right, I could see it. Like, just even looking like minor league numbers from last year, like 20, 30 in 120 games, I can get down with that. Some positional versatility. Batted 284, has had a high batting average throughout his minor league career. I'm like, all right, I can get down with this. I can mess around with this a little bit.
And again, let me stress, there is no one else to play third base in Chicago. So
yeah,
I think
roster resource is projecting him to start at third base, but lower in the lineup, but he can work his way up. Yeah, that's very intriguing name. Who's going very late? I don't even know where he's going. No, he's going even before the guys we just mentioned. So he's right around the 250 mark, but still really late. That ADP could rise as we get into like spring training, especially if he's hitting really well. Like if he has a hot spring training, we're going to see his name on a lot of sleeper lists come March. Potentially even my sleeper list written in March. My late round hitter is kind of a cop out. It's a catcher. It's Ivan Herrera. But I love late round catchers. Dollar catchers in salary cap leagues. But if you're picking a catcher really late, why not pick one that's going to hit 300 and probably hit 10 home runs playing every day for a not great Cardinals team. He should kind of like get 100 starts as a catcher or dual eligible maybe like DH. I don't know. Probably more catcher. But like if you can get someone really late and for $1 or where his ADP is I imagine really late, it is 285. So yeah, right on that same range we're talking about. Give me a catcher that's going to hit 300. And I could toss it back to you, but I imagine you don't have any strong feelings on Ivan Herrera. But I do have another late round pitcher that I knew you would want to talk about a little bit. What about Max Scherzer? Can we do a late round Max Scherzer this year? Any interest? Nothing?
Can we tell them what I did in the sheet when you put his name in there?
You wrote that he's old.
Well, you wrote Max Scherzer with a question mark, so I answered your question that he's old. I don't have any interest in him or Verlander, and that is, I haven't had interest in them for like the last couple of years. They could do great things, or not great anymore, but they could do above average things probably at this point in their careers. I feel like at that point, I'm going to take someone with a much like steadier floor. I'd rather have a steady floor hitter than Max Scherzer. So
that's fair. But if you're going completely zero SP or late round SP, he's outside the top 300. Like he's free. He's free in drafts right now. And he can, I mean, he's not going to win you your league, but I just feel like Max Scherzer is someone who's like just, until he had this like run of like old man injuries, he just had like a rubber arm and like defied logic of how much he could throw. And I just feel like after, pretty much a semi-year off, he's with the Blue Jays now. Not that they're like a pitching powerhouse, but I don't know. There's just something about a late round outside the top 300 Max Scherzer that I'm in a league with a guy who like, I call it the Carlos Gonzalez rule, where every year he drafts like 2 or 3 just like absolutely washed up veterans, and it's like it never works out for him. It worked like one time for him with like Carlos Gonzalez, but he does it like every year. So it's just like a running joke in our league now. But like I guarantee you, he drafts Max Scherzer in that league, unless I draft him first, because I might. But I think we can get out of there on that one. Anything else before I shut it down?
No, I mean, I think that, depending on what strategy you want to use, it'll change who you're looking at in what round. So as you practice them, and you can practice them in Draft Wizard, it's just kind of like figure out who you're drawn to, make a list of them. And then if you find yourself doing one of the strategies and really kind of staying with it, like then you'll have your short list of people you're going to target. And I think that's really helpful on draft day, so that you're not kind of scurrying around trying to learn about some of these players that you're going to need suddenly because you waited on starting pitching. So that's my biggest strategy, is to just that whoever's going like 250 and beyond, know a little something about a lot of them. And that's where your steals are. So.
Yeah, that's great advice. I feel like I shouldn't even close it out now. I should just, just hit stop record on that. But I do have to close this out. But I will say, as I mentioned earlier in the show, jump in the YouTube comments and let us know, what you think about the different strategies for this year, the targets that we mentioned, anyone we missed talking about, anyone that you would want us to include. And if you have any questions, throw them in there, and I'll either respond in YouTube or we'll talk about them next week. Because next week, presumably, Worm will be back. And we're supposed to talk about some guys who are just impossible to rank this year. Some of the Kelly and I participate in the rankings contest. I think Worm might participate this year too. And some players are easier to rank than others, and some people are going to kind of like make or break seasons and accuracy contests in the rankings accuracy contest. So on the next episode, we're going to break down some of those toughest players, some of those players giving us headaches. And so let us know in the YouTube comments, again, continuing to plug the YouTube comments, who you'd like us to talk about, because I haven't created the list yet. And so if you have any good players that you're really struggling, throw them in there, and maybe we'll talk about them next week. But that is all we have for today. For Kelly Kirby, I am Mike Maher. This has been The Cycle, and thank you for stopping by.